Hi, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I'm Headley, another fat bearded man talking about records, and I'm joined by my friend
John, 6-inch pianist 319. Yeah, I had to think about my name then. It's not a good sign, is it? Not a good start.
You look in the back of your neck. What does it say?
Let's hope I'm wearing my own clothes. That's the
Yeah. Brenda, who's she? So we thought we'd get together and do a bit of an end of the year roundup of some of the best things of our favorite things that we've got this year. Now, it's not. We talked about this, didn't we? Because I said to John, I'm not sure I've bought a huge number of new releases, i.e. new records, not re-releases this year. What about you, John? You probably have, haven't you?
Yeah, no, so I have bought new albums this year. I'm not to share any of those. I'll probably do a separate video. These are all stuff where I've gone out digging and I've found interesting stuff. And yeah, that's what I'm going to show today. My favorite pickups when I've been out digging.
Yeah. So some of it's for me, some of it's old, some of it's stuff that has been out for a while, but I suddenly realised that it was available. So shall I go first? By the way, also there is stuff I've shown before. So if you've watched my videos before or throughout the year, you might well have seen some of these stuff. So I'm going to start with a box set, and that's the Bobby Darin or the Bob. It's interesting. It's Bobby Darin on there.
Because the album's under the name Bob Darin, aren't they?
That is, yeah. Do you know what? I have literally just realised that. Right. So yeah, this was what was it? 1968 and 69, the two albums he released, and it was a big departure for him, wasn't it? I know you've got the album, haven't you?
Yeah.
What was it that all rage for that long gatefold?
I know, yeah. I mean, that is a great album, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Country funk, kind of folky country funk, isn't it? Really,
yeah.
With a bit of a groove.
That's an album that I discovered through the country funk compilations.
Yeah.
That first volume, it's got light blue on it. Yeah.
And then it also has the prior album, which is perhaps not quite as funky and quite as fully formed, but it's still got some stuff on it, and it's very folky, that one. And then it also came with an extra. Again, Bob Darin. Yeah, that's weird, isn't it? I can't believe I didn't notice that. So yeah, these were just a blip really in his career. He started at Direction, a label to release his own stuff. So he did those two albums. They didn't sell anything, and he ended up going back and doing sort of what he was doing. It's interesting to note that the album before that one was a covers album of songs from Dr. Dolittle.
Oh, that's a low point. That's a
complete change. So yeah, so that was released, I think, in 2019. And so I was really pleased because it's quite difficult to get Commitment, and luckily I was able to find it in that box set. So that was quite early on in the year I got that. So I'm really pleased with that.
And that was an Amazon bargain that you found, wasn't it?
I wouldn't say it was a bargain. Right. I mean, I think it was about 35, 36 quid. But for three albums in a box, it's not bad, is it? You know, so I was quite happy to pay out that much.
Right. Okay. So about a month ago, I went down to the Reading Record Fair, and I met Martin Parrott, the vinyl scavenger, and Rob Walker, and we had a lovely few hours. Great fair. A fair, best suited for buyers rather than sellers. Plenty of choice. I could have spent an absolute fortune, but this was the first thing that I bought. So this is Lee Dorsey with "Yes We Can." Now this came out in 1970, and if I was going to make a list of my favourite or the best, the top 20 soul and funk albums, this would be on it, because this is a perfect example of that New Orleans funk. So vocals by Lee Dorsey, the band playing on here is backed by the Meters, produced and written by Alan Toussaint. It's absolutely perfect. It's a brilliant record. And I'd never heard the album before, but I knew most of the tracks from compilations and singles and such like. However, there is one problem with this record, right? So I would say this is pretty much damn near perfect album. except for the closing song, right? The
Okay.
closing song is almost like a bit of a stand-up routine, a little bit of a comedy skit.
Ooh.
And the comedy on it has dated really badly, really, really badly, you know. So can you have a perfect album where one of the tracks is, you know, Best Left Alone?
An imperfect album. Yeah,
an imperfect album. Yeah, so it's just such a shame. But I mean, it's like a comedy skit with a funky musical backing. You know, that's
right.
But the actual comedy is pretty poorly dated. But this is a brilliant record. I mean, it starts off with Yes We Can, which the Pointer Sisters recorded a few years later as Yes We Can, which has been sampled loads of times. And it's got a version of Sneaking Sally Through the Alley, which I spoke about recently in a Robert Palmer video that I did. That was his debut album, Sneaking Sally Through the Alley, where he did a version of that song. But this album, if you don't have it, then definitely want to pick up without a doubt.
Because I was listening to that, I think, and another one of his from a similar sort of time. And does that one have Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town on it? That one?
On this, no, it doesn't. No.
It must be the other one, because he does a great version of that.
Right.
Yeah, that was one I'd really like. That's one of those records that the videos we've done about sort of country funk and country soul and things like that, I'd really like to get, but it's also a very expensive record. So
right, okay. Yeah, no, I don't know that version. I'll have to check that out.
Right, okay, cool record. Okay, this is a record from 1969. It's Bodine, the only album by this group. And it's got a very weird gatefold. That's the band inside. But then the back is just the same as the front.
But upside down.
Do you like it with the brown and the yellow logo, or the yellow with the brown? Yeah. Anyway, this is great. I'd got this. I heard it online, and it's not been released on CD, so it's only available as a vinyl record. And I would say it's a kind of, if you imagine the Beatles, if they were making their albums sort of as part of the West Coast California sound. It's like a West Coast California sound twinned with the Beatles, with a bit of funk and R&B in there. And also the Kinks. They have, you know how the Kinks or Ray Davies sort of writes the 3-act song, which often doesn't just do that verse, chorus. It's often 3 sort of movements. They kind of do that as well. So there's. And so if you've never heard Bodine and you like the Beatles and you like a bit of sort of West Coast Birds and Buffalo Springfield and stuff like that, you should really check this record out, because I think it's a little gem that people don't really know about. They toured with the Birds, the Doors at the time. And actually, there's a guy in it I think he's called Kerry Magnus. He's one of them, and he actually plays bass on "Waiting for the Sun," the album for the Doors. I think it's only on one track, but yeah, he's on that. So obviously they're friends with the Doors. But yeah, if you like the Beatles and you like a bit of West Coast and a bit of sort of R&B funky stuff, give them a listen. It's a great record. So
did any of them go on to do anything else afterwards, or is that
not really? There's a guy. I can't remember his name. There's one who actually he's ended up in Glasgow, and he does sort of avant-garde music. He does music for ballets and things like that. So he's kind of very very arty-farty, and I can't remember his name. He's one of these guys. He's one of that lot. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
and
cool.
Is that relatively cheap? Is it easy to find, or is it?
In the States, I reckon you could probably find it really, really easily. Here, this is why it was a good pickup for me, one of my favourite pickups, because I've been trying to find it for a couple of years, and suddenly one came up on Discogs or eBay. I can't remember which. And in fact, it is Discogs, and it was I think this was the first purchase of the year. So this was the 3rd of January. I bought this.
Oh right.
I had 2 days off.
Come on, child, do your knitting now. Till your daddy get home. Yeah, do your knitting now. today.
Right. Okay. So my next record, a very well-known record. This is Donald Byrd with Places and Spaces. Came out on Blue Note. I think it's 1975. Is it something like that? So this is an album that I've been after for years. Now, I first heard the track Dominoes, Falling Like Dominoes, covered by Paul Weller. Of course, there's always a Paul Weller link, as you know. on his Live Wood album, he sort of tacked it onto the end of one of his tunes. And that got me interested in Donald Byrd. I listened to, obviously, best ofs and whatnot. But this is quite different from a lot of his other albums. This is more like a soul record than a jazz record. It's jazz funk, but, you know, I'm a bit funny with jazz funk because I don't like jazz funk to be too clever. I want it to be closer to soul music, you know. This has got lots of strings. It's close to a Philly soul album than one of these sort of arty-farty, very clever, very cerebral jazz funk records where there's lots of notes and it must look great all charted out and written down, but, you know, I don't want to listen to it, you know, so. But this is a damn near perfect album as well. This is an original UK copy that I got early in the year. This had actually just been re-released as part of the Blue Note series that's going on at the moment, the reissue series. Now, this is a Mazel Brothers production, and it was reissued a couple of weeks ago with this, which is Bobby Humphrey's Fancy Dancer, which is another Mazel Brothers production from the same sort of period. And I say, this is the reissue. This sounds absolutely fantastic. So, you know, in hindsight, if I hadn't have picked up a lovely original and spent the money on it, I'm sure I'd have been perfectly happy with the reissue. But yeah, this is definitely one of my finds of the year. I say, you know, being a geek as well, it's an absolutely lovely condition. It sounds wonderful, and I've played this so much this year.
What's the picture in one of the? It was a little plane.
It's a little plane, yeah.
A little Cessna or something, is it? Oh yeah,
a little plane, yeah, yeah. That's great. Yeah, lovely.
Oh well, thank the gods you shoved in some jazz for the jazzers, because I haven't.
There's a bit more jazz to come as well.
Oh,
you know.
Brilliant! This is why we work well. You know, I show the country and stuff like that, and you do a wider range of music. Okay, this isn't country. This is Dodgy, the UK indie pop sort of R&B influenced popsters. And now this is an EP, the homegrown EP, and this was never released. This came just after they released their first album, the Dodgy album. And originally A&M wanted to re-release it with extra tracks on it. Right. So they made Dodgy go into the studio and record some more tracks that they were going to bung on the end of the Dodgy album, their debut album. And they didn't like the idea because for them, and like a lot of artists, you know, you've created an album. That is what it is. I mean, this has all been big recently with Adele saying she didn't want people to listen to it out of context and stuff. And so it's that sort of feeling. So they kind of fought against A&M, which I suppose might not have been a great idea because, you know, any re-release and stuff might well get pushed and more advertising and, you know, anyway. They said no. And so A&M said, okay, well, you can put that out as an EP in between records. Right. And for some reason, it never materialized. So there are these DJ copies that got sent out, but it was never actually released. And of course, the song "Homegrown" would turn up again on 3-Piece Suite, their third album. And I think there is another song. What's the other song on here that is? Don't Go Back to the Beaten Track, which was released on a single, and I think actually maybe there was again for 3-Piece Suite was on that. But there was one track that was never re-released. It was on one of their later albums, but for a long time it wasn't available. So I was very pleased to get hold of that. One of the last things in their discography that I didn't have. So,
well, as you know, EP. You're preaching to the converted, Headley, because we've spoken a lot about Dodgy, haven't we, this year? You know, so we're both big fans. And I was saying to you before that this is a really important album for me. This is the homegrown album, which would have come out slightly after that EP, wouldn't it? You know, so. And I was saying to you the other day that I know when I bought this copy recently, just a month or so ago, but I bought the album. I know I bought it in late October because I've worked for the same employer since October 1994, and I bought this album with my first pay packet. Back then, way back when. And I love this album so much, So I didn't know the first album at the time. I went back to it later on, but this album, I think, is just a perfect British pop record.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that's interesting about them, there is a sort of a northern soul element to their music. There weren't many other bands that were necessarily doing that sort of slightly soulful thing as well with the kind of Britpop sound.
Well, just on this copy has got the original Hype sticker on it. So just listen to these quotes, right? So this is from Time Out. This is one of those legal highs you hear about. NME said this. It said, after every performance, they should pull down the building and put up a fucking monument on the site that they played. What a brilliant quote. And the last one is just by Melody Maker. They're touched by genius. I mean, they were loved in 1994.
They were, yeah. I mean, I remember when they first started playing, and when they were going around, and they used to get amazing reviews of their shows. Which, to be fair, they were great shows. Just a three-piece.
Yeah, it's interesting how quickly it disappeared, though. So obviously, Three-Piece Suite came out, and it was quite a big album, wasn't it? Good Enough was a big, top 5 single, whatever over here. But in the late 90s, after that sort of Britpop boom, guitar bands just couldn't get arrested in the UK chart because it was all about pop music. When you got to 1999, it was all about pop music. And I can't imagine what it was like being in that sort of situation where you're such a big band in the country, and then within 12 months, it's just all gone,
Yeah. That's cool. Oh, we're thinking on the same wavelength there. Okay, I'm going to pull a Mazzy on this one. Mazzy always, for these sort of things, finds a way to completely change the rules. So I'm going to do that. And basically, this is a collection of sort of country funk or funky country, soulful country stuff that I've managed to get hold of this year that I'm really pleased about. Right. One of which I have shown. I think we did our video together, and that Bobby Hartfield, who was one of the Righteous Brothers. We talked about that one. That's probably less countrified, but more sort of more funky soul, really. But that was good. I mean, these were things, I picked up. That was early in the year, that one. Then this was a surprise to get hold of this one. This is Dale Hawkins. And he's the cousin, I think, of Ronnie Hawkins. So he was kind of big started off in the sort of rockabilly era. And he was supposedly the founder or the instigator of swamp rock boogie, if there is such a thing as swamp rock boogie. This I think the first track and the album title. This is 1969. This one, L.A., Memphis, and Tyler. L.A., Memphis, and Tyler, Texas. And I believe that's on the first country funk compilation. So I was pleased to get hold of that. So that was one that I picked up this year. It's got some good stuff on here. You've got James Burton and Ry Cooder on guitar, so you can't really go wrong with some of the stuff.
Very nice. That. Great cover as well. I love that cover photo.
Yeah, they seem to do a lot. You got that period where they did these sort of superimposing, a sort of here's the foreground, and I found them a little bit weird. It's like it's almost like he could lick his own fingers, It's a bit weird. Not that you'd want to necessarily.
I think if I ever made an album, I'd quite like the idea of having like a picture of me with a tiny me there as well. That would be cool.
But you want to be interacting.
Holding it like that, just like that. Yeah. That would be good.
Yeah, lighting your cigarette for your tiny one,
That's right.
So the other one I picked up was Rob Galbraith. This is, I think, 1970. And he did a couple of albums, but was more of a producer by the time. That's where he was the big producer for Ronnie Milsap all through the 80s and into the early 90s, I think. Right. But he also, if you're familiar with the Larry John Wilson albums, that they appear on the country funk things. And also, if you've seen the film Heart-Worn Highways, he's on that. And so, yeah, so he produced that. But this is a lovely, lovely record. It's a kind of an acoustic soul, funky soul record. It's a quite stripped back, and it doesn't even have horns on it. It's like they talk. I think they talks on the back about were they going to add horns to it, but actually they decided they weren't going to. They were going to leave it a bit more bare, a bit more stripped back, and it really helps for that. I think they're all songs by him. I think. Yeah, he did an album again in 1976, which is quite difficult to get and quite expensive, but that's less of the country. Yeah, I suppose this is, if you imagine Townes Van Sant getting a bit funky, that's kind of what you might have with that. But yeah, really laid back, lovely record. Oh, it's called Nashville Dirt, by the way. You can probably read that, can't you?
I can read that. Where'd you hear about that one?
Well, again, I'm not sure if he doesn't have a track on one of the country funk.
I don't recognise the name at all.
But I think, you know, the connection to Larry John Wilson, recording those albums for Larry John Wilson, that gives you the sort of the where he came from.
Right.
But I think I found it on a website that was kind of devoted to sort of country funk kind of stuff, and also Discogs. You follow Discogs down the rabbit hole. You know, You look who produced things and who played on things, and then you try to find things that might link up, and that's how I spend my evenings.
Oh, there you go, rock and roll. Right, okay. Are you done with your little?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll shove these in at the same time because they're not technically really country funk, but they're kind of a piece. Now, this is Charlie Brown. Probably didn't become a big name because of his name, because everyone assumed he was a little guy in Peanuts. And he's it's kind of a session guitar player, really. And these are two albums. He released both of them. The reason I'm showing them is both together is they were both released in 1972. Right. And they're really nice. This one's called Portrait of a Glad Man, and this is called Up from Georgia. This one's probably a bit more electrified, electric instruments and stuff. That's far more acoustic-y, but still funky. There's some really nice ballads on it. You know what you're getting when you get tracks called Home Swamp Home and Swimming Hole. But there's a great track on here called Games, which is just brilliant. It's got the drums don't even sound like drums. They sound like somebody's hitting some kind of big, massive cardboard box or something. But yeah, he was a session player. I think he was on the original, what's it called? Hair, you know, the musical Hair.
Oh, right, yeah.
He was on the original soundtrack on the cast recording, and I think 4 years was on it. He played with, he's played with everyone over the years. Esther Phillips, he played with.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, Van Morrison. Apparently he was Van Morrison during the sort of, that sort of 69 kind of period. I think he was supposedly his guitar player when he played live. I couldn't see him on any of the records, but I think he was his on the touring, an arranger apparently.
Right.
Yeah, so really lovely, both of those. Again, these are. If I was thinking of doing some record videos about, you know, the best records you've never heard, and I would put both of those on that because I'm more than aware that there's some records that I really love that I think other people would probably not like whatsoever. Yeah. I get that completely. But I think both of those are albums that people could really get behind, a bit like the Bodine album. I think it's one of those things that in an alternate universe, they are the big names. You know, they're the ones that everyone's going on about, and they're doing audiophile pressings of them and things like that. So, yeah, but Charlie Brown.
I'm calling out your name now. I'm calling out your name now. Well, I'm calling out your name, trying to discover your game. Yes, I hope it's not the same game, lame game that lots of other gals play. Now they got the hearts for you, but they wouldn't give you the time of day.
you're all right with that, though. I mean, I suppose any sort of genre of music will have those little pockets, won't they, of records which aren't necessarily seen as being too cool. I mean, I don't know how, a lot of the time, how certain records come to the forefront. It's either through a reissue or somebody famous mentioned them. Like, for example, obviously, like a big album like the Flying Burrito Brothers, A Gilded Palace of Sin. You know, I came across that through Peter Buck from REM talking about it, and that's how I came across that record. And then suddenly, everywhere I looked, people were talking about it. But sometimes you need that you need those sort of people or labels talking about or reissuing those records to get the attention. And now it's everybody knows it, don't they? You know, it's like the Beatles.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the interesting thing with those are those sort of records. These are the great records. When people go, why do you collect records? You can get MP3s. Well, you can't get these as MP3s. You can't buy them as CDs either. They've never been re-released like that.
Well, I think this is perhaps something quite similar. This is it's not country music, but it's, you know, similar in the sense that, you know, I doubt very much it's been reissued. This is a band called Paz, and the album's called Candine Love Song. Now, looking at the sleeve, it looks pretty nondescript. Now, I'm going to blame the VC for this. Now,
James got a lot to answer for, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has got a lot to answer for the VC. But James Buttery over in New Zealand, he shows a lot of jazz records, and he showed a record by this band 6 months ago. The band's called Paz. I think the album was called Paz Is Back, and it came out in the early 80s. I did check it out at the time online, and it's interesting. If I saw it, I'd certainly pick it up. I went into a local record shop. They had what the guy behind the counter described as a collection of esoteric jazz, so lots of ECM type stuff. And as I was going through, I saw this record. Obviously, I didn't know it, but I recognised the title, recognised the band. And my big mistake here was asking him to play it. So basically, if there's anything you want to hear, just shout up. And I picked out a couple of things. I knew what they were. And I said, oh, yeah, just stick this on, will you? And he put it on. And he put on the first track on side 2, which is a track called The Buddha. Now, you've seen Dirty Harry. Yeah? Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Dirty Harry. And, you know, that film is famous for the score, the Lalo Schifrin score. It's that, you know, funky drums with lots of congas on there, sort of Fender Rhodes piano, funky flutes. It's a brilliant 1970s film score. And, you know, I could have swore that I was listening to that soundtrack, because the opening track of this album is jazzy, but it is as funky as you like. And the mistake I made was getting this guy to play the record and him hearing it and thinking, oh, yeah, that's pretty bloody good, isn't it? So the first thing that he did was get on Discogs, look it up and said, oh, yeah, that's worth a few quid, isn't it? You know?
Serves you right.
So I'm pretty sure that if you'd have looked at that cover, he'd have said, oh, yeah, they'll have it for whatever, you know, he'd have picked a number out of the air. But once I'd heard that track, of course, I wanted the record then, didn't I? You know, so I had to leave with it. So I ended up paying up for it. But it's a great record. It's a bit of a mixture. I mean, there were a British band. I think they're classed as a sort of jazz rock band, but there's elements of folk and a little bit of classical in there as well at times. You know, the album does move through different styles, but there's 2 or 3 really big tunes. And as I say, if you want to check anything out, the track called The Buddha, it's about 7.5 minutes long, and it's lovely. Fantastic.
I would also assume it's going to cost you a bit more, because it's clearly still to be returned to the library.
Yes.
Is this what they talk about, library records?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.